welcome back to Whispers in the Dark. Dim the lights, put on your headphones, and make sure every door in the room is locked. Tonight, we are going to Ashwick, a town where horror films are treated like scripture, where everybody knows the rules, and where somebody has decided that knowing the rules will not save you. Now settle in, keep your phone within reach, and whatever you do, do not answer if it rings after midnight. Ashwick looked peaceful from a distance. The town rested in a valley of black pines and silver birch, its narrow streets curled around a cold lake-like fingers around a throat. In daylight, painted shop fronts and flower baskets made it seem almost quaint. At night, fog came off the water and pressed against the buildings. It softened the street lights, swallowed the church steeple, and turned every person walking home into a shadow without a face. The people of Ashwick loved October. Paper ghosts hung in windows. Plastic skeletons grinned from porches. The Rook Theater showed old horror films every night until Halloween, and students from Ashwick Community College crowded the lobby dressed as famous monsters. Everybody laughed at fear because fear had always been something that happened on a screen. Then Rowan Keel answered her telephone. Rowan was 19, with copper hair that fell to her shoulders and a pale spray of freckles across her nose. She lived with her parents in a renovated farmhouse outside town, though on that wet Thursday night, her parents were at an anniversary dinner 2 counties away. Rowan had the house to herself, a bowl of popcorn in her lap, and an old horror film flickering silently on the television. Rain tapped the windows. Wind bent the orchard trees until their branches scraped the glass. The telephone rang at 11:47. Rowan glanced toward the cream-colored phone on the kitchen wall. Few people called the house line anymore. She considered ignoring it, but the ringing continued with the stubborn rhythm of an alarm. She lifted the receiver. Keel Residence. For a moment, there was only breathing. It was slow and damp, as if the caller had been running through rain. Then a voice said, "What are you watching?" It was neither clearly male nor female. The words came through a small electronic distorter, layered with a metallic whisper. Rowan smiled despite herself. Very funny, Jonah. Who is Jonah? The idiot who will be cleaning toilets at the Rook when I tell his boss about this. You think this is a prank, because that is safer than thinking it is not. Her smile faded. She looked through the kitchen doorway into the dark hall. You have the wrong number. No, Rowan. I have exactly the right one. The line clicked dead. Rowan held the receiver away from her ear. A chill moved across her shoulders. She set it back in its cradle and checked the front door. Locked. The windows above the sink were latched. Beyond them, the yard was a wet plain of grass ending at the orchard. The phone rang again. This time Rowan snatched it up. Listen, you creep. I am calling the police. Then you had better know where your telephone cord goes. Rowan followed the coiled cord with her eyes. It ran from the phone into a small hole in the wall. Outside, the caller whispered, all the way around the house, very old-fashioned, very easy to cut. The lights went out. The television died. The refrigerator hum stopped. Darkness filled the farmhouse so completely that Rowan heard her own breath catch. She dropped the receiver. A moment later, emergency power brought the hall lights back in a weak amber glow. The phone hung against the wall, swinging slowly by its cord. Rowan grabbed a carving knife from the wooden block beside the stove. She opened a drawer and found a flashlight, nearly fumbling it when the beam revealed her reflection in the rain-blackened window. The receiver crackled behind her. "Do you remember Mercy House?" Rowan froze. Mercy House stood abandoned north of town, a stone convalescent hospital where children with lung disease had once slept beneath open windows. 1 year earlier, a college student named Tamsin Hayes had vanished there during a fire. Police had found blood, burned clothing, and a section of collapsed floor, but no body. Rowan picked up the receiver with a trembling hand. "I was never there." The caller laughed softly. "That is the first lie." Something struck the back door. Rowan turned. The doorknob moved once, then twice. She ran into the hall, clutching the knife. Every room seemed unfamiliar in the dim emergency light. Family photographs watched her from the walls, her mother smiling beside a birthday cake, her father holding a trout. Rowan and her friends on the college steps, arms wrapped around one another. In that photograph, Tamsin Hayes stood at the edge of the group. The front doorbell rang. Rowan stared at it. The bell rang again, a cheerful 2-note chime. "Who is it?" she called. No answer. Her mobile phone lay upstairs beside her bed. Rowan moved toward the staircase. As she reached the first step, the television in the sitting room burst back to life. The screen showed grainy footage of Mercy House. A handheld camera moved through corridors furred with mold. Young voices laughed behind it. One of them belonged to Rowan. On screen, Tamsin stood in a doorway wearing a paper crown. Her long dark hair shone in the beam of the camera. She looked irritated and frightened. "Turn it off, Eli," Tamsin said. "This is not funny anymore." Rowan entered the sitting room as if pulled by a wire. No. The footage continued. A metal door slammed. Tamsin screamed from the other side. Someone laughed. Then flame bloomed at the bottom of the image. Rowan hurled the flashlight at the television. The screen cracked, but the video kept playing beneath a white spiderweb of broken glass. Behind her, the coat closet opened. The figure that stepped out was tall and narrow, dressed in a black raincoat shining with water. Its mask was made of white porcelain. The cheeks were smooth, the eyes deep black wells, and the mouth had been carved into a patient smile. Red thread crossed that smile in 6 crude stitches. Rowan screamed and slashed with the kitchen knife. The figure caught her wrist and drove a gloved fist into her stomach. Air exploded from her lungs. The knife fell. Rowan clawed at the mask, but the attacker seized her hair and smashed her face into the edge of the fireplace mantel. Her upper lip split against her teeth. Blood filled her mouth with the hot taste of pennies. She kicked backward, struck a knee, and broke free. She ran for the kitchen. The masked figure followed without hurrying. Rowan grabbed the back door lock. Before she could turn it, a knife entered the soft flesh above her right hip. The blade made a thick, intimate sound. Rowan looked down and saw 6 inches of steel shining through the front of her sweater. For one impossible second, she did not understand what she was seeing. The attacker pulled the knife out. Pain arrived like boiling water poured into her body. Her knees buckled. She slid against the door, leaving a wet red fan across the white paint. "Please," she gasped. "I did not start the fire." The white face leaned close. Behind the mask came the metallic voice. "That is the second lie." Rowan drove her thumb into one of the eye holes. The attacker jerked back. She forced the door open and stumbled into the rain. Mud swallowed her bare feet. She ran across the yard with one hand pressed to her wound. Blood pulsed between her fingers. Behind her, the kitchen door creaked. The orchard offered darkness and cover. Rowan reached the first trees and forced herself between them. Branches tore at her sweater. Wet leaves stuck to her face. She could hear nothing but rain and the desperate chopping of her breath. Headlights appeared on the road beyond the orchard. Her parents. Rowan staggered toward the lights. She tried to shout, but her voice came out thin and broken. The car slowed at the gate. The masked figure stepped from behind an apple tree and hooked an arm across her throat. Rowan was pulled backward. She kicked and thrashed, watching the headlights sweep up the drive less than 100 feet away. The knife pressed beneath her jaw. "Last question," the voice whispered. "What is the final rule?" Rowan sobbed. "I do not know. Nobody does." The blade drew across her throat. The cut opened from one side of her neck to the other. Warm blood sheeted down her chest. Her hands flew to the wound, but there was too much to hold inside. Each heartbeat pushed another dark stream between her fingers. The attacker turned her toward the arriving car, so she could see salvation come too late. Rowan collapsed among the roots. Her final sight was the farmhouse porch, glowing softly through the rain, and her mother stepping out of the car with a wrapped piece of anniversary cake in her hands. At dawn, police found Rowan seated at the family dining table. Her wet hair had been combed. Her wound had been stitched closed with red thread. In front of her sat a place card bearing 2 words. Rule 1. Claire Hayes heard about the murder at 7 the next morning. She was standing in the narrow bathroom of her aunt's house, pinning up her black hair, when a radio announcer said Rowan's name. The pin slipped from Claire's fingers and clicked into the sink. Claire was 19, small-boned and sharp-featured, with gray eyes that rarely seemed to blink. A pale burn scar climbed from her left collarbone toward her ear, a souvenir from the night her older sister vanished. She usually hid it beneath high-necked sweaters. That morning, she touched it without thinking. Her Aunt Lena appeared in the doorway wearing her sheriff's uniform. Lena Hayes had the same gray eyes as Claire, though hers were surrounded by sleepless lines. Rain darkened the shoulders of her coat. "You heard," Lena said. Claire nodded. "I need to ask you about Rowan." She was at Mercy House. It was not a question. Lena closed the bathroom door. "We do not know that." "Yes, we do. Rowan lied last year. They all lied. Including you." Claire looked at her reflection. The girl in the mirror seemed bloodless and remote. "I told you what I remembered. You told me you woke outside while the building was already burning. You said Tamsin went back in alone. If there is more, this is the time." Claire turned to face her. "Do you think I killed Rowan?" "I think somebody wants me to wonder." Lena handed her a clear evidence sleeve. Inside was a photograph taken from the wall of Mercy House before the fire. It showed 7 students standing beneath the hospital sign. Rowan Keel, Eli Mercer, Priya Nair, Jonah Reed, Caleb Ormond, Tamsin Hayes, and Claire. A circle of red ink surrounded Rowan's face. Across the bottom, written in narrow capital letters, were the words 6 rules left. By 9 o'clock, the college courtyard had become a forest of umbrellas and television equipment. Reporters stood beneath the stone arches, rehearsing grave expressions. Students gathered in frightened clusters, speaking Rowan's name with the greedy disbelief of people who had known her just well enough to feel involved. Claire crossed the courtyard with Lena's photograph folded inside her coat. Eli Mercer waited beside the dry fountain. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy hair that fell into his eyes and a face so open and gentle that strangers often trusted him immediately. He had dated Claire for 6 months, though neither of them used the word love. Since Tamsin vanished, Claire found any promise about the future faintly ridiculous. Eli wrapped his arms around her. For a moment, she let herself disappear against his chest. "Lena said you were safe," he murmured. "I called 6 times. My phone was downstairs. They are saying Rowan was opened from throat to stomach." Claire pulled away. "Who is saying that?" "Cal, which means it is probably worse." Caleb Ormond was already on the library steps, speaking into a microphone beneath the red light of a portable camera. He was 20, handsome in a polished and deliberate way, with lacquered dark hair, an expensive wool coat, and perfect teeth. He hosted a late-night campus radio program called Dead Air. Most weeks he discussed horror films and local legends. Since Tamsin vanished, he had transformed Mercy House into a recurring series, complete with eerie music and anonymous interviews. Ashwick has spent a year pretending the Mercy House tragedy ended with one missing woman, Cal told the camera. This morning, the truth announced itself in blood. Priya Nair shoved through the crowd and lowered the camera lens with one hand. Priya was slender, with deep brown skin, round glasses, and a heavy braid tied in blue thread. She edited the college paper and treated every rumor as a personal enemy. Her intelligence could make people feel clumsy, but Claire knew how much fear hid beneath her precision. Priya had not slept well since Mercy House. None of them had. Rowan has been dead for less than 10 hours, Priya said. Try behaving like a human being until lunch. Cal raised the camera again. People deserve information. You deserve a parasite test. Jonah Reed stood a few steps behind them with his hands in his coat pockets. Jonah was thin and pale, his black curls always in need of cutting. He worked as a projectionist at the Rook and could recite the death order of nearly every horror film ever made. Usually, he had a joke ready. That morning, his mouth looked carved shut. Claire gathered them beneath an archway away from the reporters. She unfolded the photograph. Priya stared at the red circle. Where did you get this? It was left with Rowan's body. Jonah swallowed. 6 rules left means 6 people. Thank you, arithmetic prince, Priya said, though her voice shook. Eli studied the photograph. Why start with Rowan? Because she was alone, Cal said. He had followed them. That is rule 1 in every decent horror film. Isolation creates vulnerability. Claire looked at him. Did the police tell you how she died? Cal's smile faltered. I have sources. You said she was cut from throat to stomach. A deputy talks after 2 drinks. You know how this town works. No, Priya said. We know how you work. The college bells began to ring. After the 3rd chime, every mobile phone in the courtyard rang at once. Students gasped and laughed nervously. Dozens of hands reached into pockets and bags. Claire's phone vibrated against her ribs. She answered. The metallic whisper filled her ear. Hello, witness. Around her, other students heard the same recorded voice. Their expressions changed together. Rule 1 is simple. The person who says she was never there dies first. Claire watched Priya turn pale. Eli gripped his phone so hard his knuckles whitened. Rule 2. The person who sells the story becomes part of it. Cal lowered his phone. The calls ended. For several seconds, the courtyard was silent. Then panic broke like glass. Students ran toward the gates. Reporters shouted questions. Somewhere, a girl began to cry. Cal forced a laugh. Mass dial equipment. Impressive, but not supernatural. Claire stepped close to him. You are rule 2. Then I suppose I should give the killer a good show. He looked confident, but a pulse jumped rapidly in his neck. Classes were suspended by noon. Sheriff Lena ordered everyone in the photograph to remain with family or under police supervision. Patrol cars blocked the roads around Mercy House, and officers searched Rowan's farmhouse for fibers, prints, and footprints that the rain had already erased. Cal ignored the order. At 10 that night, He entered the campus radio station through a side door and locked himself inside the broadcast booth. He told nobody except his audience, announcing live that fear depended upon silence and that he intended to break it. "The Mercy House killer is listening," he said into the microphone. "So let us talk directly." The station occupied the basement of the arts building. Its walls were lined with gray acoustic foam. A wide pane of glass separated the booth from the empty control room. Beyond that room waited a corridor where every ceiling light had been turned off. Cal leaned toward the microphone. "You think you are directing a horror film. You have a costume, a voice, a list of victims. But you have forgotten the central truth about killers in masks. The mask is always more interesting than the coward underneath." The telephone on the console lit up. Cal smiled and pressed the call button. "Dead Air, you are live. Do you want the exclusive?" Cal's smile became rigid. "I want your name. Names are for victims. Legends wear faces." The control room monitor flickered on. It showed a camera feed of Cal sitting in the booth. He turned toward the camera mounted above the door. On the monitor, the stitched white mask rose slowly behind his chair. Cal spun around. Nothing was there. The caller laughed. "Editing is everything." The booth lights died. Cal backed against the console. His microphone continued transmitting every sound to radios across Ashwick. "You cannot frighten me with a blackout," he said. From the corridor came a faint scraping. The control room door opened by itself. Cal lifted a heavy metal microphone stand. "Come in, then." The masked figure appeared behind the glass. It crossed the control room, its black coat whispering against the foam walls. Cal swung the stand at the booth window. The glass shuddered, but held. The figure raised one gloved finger, asking for silence. Then it vanished beneath the console. Cal stared through the window. "Where did you go?" The ceiling vent above him burst open. The killer dropped onto his back. Cal crashed face first into the broadcast console. His mouth struck a bank of switches, knocking 2 teeth loose. The microphone stand rolled away. The killer looped an audio cable around his throat and pulled. Cal clawed at the cord. His chair overturned. Buttons flashed beneath his hands, triggering bursts of music, applause, and canned screams. Across town, listeners heard him choke between fragments of cheerful advertisements. He managed to hook 2 fingers beneath the cable and wrench sideways. The killer lost balance. Cal drove an elbow back and felt it connect. He scrambled toward the booth door, blood pouring from his gums. The lock would not turn. "Help me," he shouted into the room. "Anybody listening, call the police." The killer seized the back of his coat and dragged him to the center of the booth. A short knife flashed. It entered Cal's cheek beside his mouth and punched through until the point emerged beneath his left eye. His scream became a bubbling howl. The killer twisted the handle, splitting the cheek wider. Flesh peeled around the blade, exposing bloody teeth through the new opening. Cal fell against the microphone. "Please," he gurgled. "Ask your question," said the metallic voice. Cal's hands shook against the desk. His listeners heard every wet breath. "Why?" The killer withdrew the blade from his face. "Because people deserve information." The knife struck his abdomen. Once, twice, again. Each impact drove a soft grunt through the microphone. Blood soaked his white shirt and spread across the console. When he tried to crawl away, his hands slipped in it. The killer pulled him upright and forced him into his chair. Cal's ruined cheek hung open like a second mouth. "Tell them what happened at Mercy House." "It was a game," he whispered. The killer pressed the knife against his right eye. Louder. "It was a game." The words traveled into bedrooms, kitchens, police cars, and all-night diners. "We wanted to scare Tamsin. We locked her in the surgery wing. We used candles and old film. The fire was an accident. Who left her? All of us." The knife entered his eye. Cal shrieked. The blade crushed through the globe with a moist pop and scraped bone at the back of the socket. Clear fluid and blood poured down his face. His body convulsed against the chair, restraints the killer had tightened around him. "That is Rule 2, the voice said into the microphone. "If you turn pain into entertainment, pain will demand a speaking part." The broadcast ended with the sound of the knife sawing through Cal's tongue. Claire listened from her aunt's kitchen. By the time Lena reached the station, Cal was dead. His tongue had been pinned to the studio notice board beneath a card marked Rule 2. The killer had arranged mirrors around his chair so that his remaining eye faced his reflection from every direction. At 1 a.m, Lena returned home. She removed her gun belt and placed it on the table with careful hands. Claire sat beneath the kitchen light, wrapped in a blanket. Eli had refused to leave her. He stood by the sink making coffee that neither of them wanted. "Cal confessed," Claire said. Lena lowered herself into a chair. "Yes, you believed us when we said Tamsin went inside by herself." "I wanted to believe you." Claire looked at Eli. He stared into the dark window above the sink. Memory returned in broken pictures. Mercy House beneath moonlight. Rowan laughing as Jonah carried a box of candles. Priya holding a camera. Cal promising they would make Tamsin admit she had lied about seeing a person living in the abandoned hospital. Claire remembered a scream behind a metal door. She remembered smoke. She remembered running. And she remembered Eli's hand in hers, pulling her away, while her sister called her name from somewhere inside the fire. "We killed her," Claire said. Lena's expression hardened. "Do not help the murderer excuse this. We left her. You were burned and half conscious. You almost died. Tamsin did die." Eli finally turned from the window. No body was found. Claire stared at him. He continued slowly. What if she got out? The kitchen telephone rang. Nobody moved. It rang a second time. Lena drew the pistol from her belt and nodded to Claire. Claire answered. "Is this my sister?" she asked. The metallic voice replied, "If it were, would you be frightened or relieved? Tell me what you want. I want you to remember Rule 3. A scream sounded upstairs. Lena rushed from the kitchen with her pistol raised. Eli followed. Claire dropped the phone and ran after them. They found the upstairs hall empty. Every door stood open except the narrow linen closet. Something scratched inside it. Lena approached and pulled the door wide. A small portable tape player sat on a shelf. The recorded scream repeated. Claire heard the front door slam below. They ran back downstairs. On the kitchen table lay another card. Rule 3. Beneath it, in red ink, someone had written a single sentence. The person who hides the evidence will be buried with it. Priya lived alone in an apartment above the college newspaper office. When Claire called, Priya answered on the first ring. "I know what Rule 3 means," she said. "Come alone." Claire looked at Lena and Eli. "No. Claire, I kept something. The police never saw it. None of you saw it. I thought hiding it would keep us together, but it only protected the lie." A floorboard creaked on Priya's end of the line. Her breath stopped. "Priya, someone is downstairs." Claire was already reaching for her coat. Lena radioed the patrol car outside and ordered the officers to the newspaper office. On the telephone, Priya whispered, "I locked the street door. Get out through a window. Second floor, brick courtyard. Then barricade the apartment. We are coming." The call crackled. The metallic voice replaced Priya's. "So is Rule 3. The line went silent. Priya stood in her apartment with a fireplace poker held in both hands. Below her, the newspaper office was dark. Desks formed crooked islands in the moonlight. Filing cabinets lined the back wall, and thousands of past editions slept in bound volumes on sagging shelves. She heard the street door open. Not forced, unlocked. Priya backed toward her bedroom. Her walls were covered with maps, notes, and photographs from the Mercy House investigation. At the center hung a large plan of the hospital, its rooms marked with black pencil. The stairs groaned. Priya shut the bedroom door and pushed a chest in front of it. Then she went to the radiator and pulled a loose brick from the wall behind it. Inside the cavity rested a videotape wrapped in newspaper. She placed the tape into a padded envelope and wrote Claire's name on the front. The bedroom doorknob turned. Priya opened the window. Cold rain blew against her face. The courtyard below was paved with stone and surrounded by high walls. A drain pipe ran beside the window, slick with water. The killer struck the bedroom door. Wood cracked around the lock. Priya tucked the envelope inside her sweater and climbed onto the sill. She gripped the drain pipe and swung her legs out. The door burst inward. The killer crossed the room and grabbed her braid. Priya screamed as she was yanked backward. The blue thread tore free. Her chin struck the sill, splitting skin to the bone. She swung the poker through the window and struck the porcelain mask. A crack appeared across its forehead. The killer let go. Priya climbed onto the roof of the newspaper office. Rain glazed the slates. She crawled toward the chimney while the masked figure came through the window behind her. "You hid the truth," the voice said. "I was afraid. So was Tamsin." Priya reached the roof ridge and tried to stand. Her feet slipped. She slid down the opposite slope, nails tearing against slate, and caught the gutter with both hands. The killer walked to the edge above her. The street was 30 feet below. Headlights appeared at the corner. Claire leaned from Lena's patrol car, pointing upward. "Priya, hold on." The killer brought a boot down on Priya's fingers. One hand released. She dangled from the other, screaming. Claire ran beneath her, with Lena close behind. Eli circled toward the fire escape. The boot descended again. Priya fell. She struck the striped awning above the office entrance. The canvas tore, slowing her before she crashed onto a stack of bundled newspapers. Her left leg bent sideways with a crack. A sharpened metal signpost entered her back beneath the shoulder blade and emerged through the front of her chest. Priya stared at the bloody point in astonishment. Her mouth opened. A thin red line ran over her lower lip. Claire dropped beside her. "Do not move." Priya almost laughed. Excellent advice. The envelope protruded from her sweater. Claire pulled it free. "Watch the end," Priya whispered. We did not see the end. Her body shivered once. Then her eyes lost focus. Above them, Lena fired at the roof. The masked figure vanished behind the chimney. Eli reached the upper floor seconds later. He found the cracked mask lying beside the open window, but no killer. The videotape began with an hour of darkness. Then, Priya's camera switched on inside Mercy House 1 year earlier. Claire, Eli, Lena, and Jonah watched it in the sheriff's office at 3 in the morning. Nobody spoke as their younger faces moved across the screen. The prank unfolded exactly as Cal had confessed. Rowan lured Tamsin into the surgery wing. Jonah played recordings through the hospital speakers. Priya filmed. Cal narrated. Eli poured lamp oil along a corridor and lit it, creating a line of harmless-looking flame meant to block Tamsin's path. Then the fire reached old curtains hanging inside a doorway. The ceiling caught almost instantly. On screen, laughter became shouting. Smoke rolled across the lens. Claire ran toward her sister while everyone else pushed for the exit. A burning timber fell between them. Tamsin shoved Claire through a broken window just before the surgery floor collapsed. Claire touched the scar on her neck. The camera lay abandoned outside. For almost 20 minutes, it recorded the building burning. Then movement appeared behind the smoke. Tamsin crawled from a drainage tunnel at the base of the hospital wall. Her clothes hung from her in burned strips. The right side of her face and body were blackened. She dragged one leg behind her. She reached the trees and looked directly toward the camera. Alive, a second figure came from the woods and wrapped her in a blanket. The image was distant, but the person's face became clear for 1 second. Jonah stepped backward from the television. It was his father, Dr. Silas Reed. Silas had served as a physician in Ashwick for 30 years. He knew every family and delivered half the town's children. He had also worked as a young orderly at Mercy House before it closed. "My father died 6 months ago," Jonah said. Lena paused the tape. "He hid her. He had a cabin on the North Shore. He said he sold it, but I never saw papers." "Why would he not bring her to a hospital?" Eli asked. Jonah's voice broke. "Because of what he did there." He opened a locked cabinet in the sheriff's archive and removed a thin folder. Priya had requested it months earlier. The records showed that Silas Reed was dismissed from Mercy House after patients accused him of cruel experimental treatments. The accusations vanished when the hospital closed. "He believed pain burned weakness out of people," Jonah said. "He used to tell me scars were lessons written on skin." Claire stared at Tamsin's burned face on the frozen screen. "He taught her the rules." Lena sent officers to the Reed cabin. They found it empty. In the cellar were medical supplies, newspaper clippings, recordings of Cal's radio show, and 7 porcelain masks drying on wooden stands. At sunrise, a message appeared on the marquee of the Rook Theater. "Rule 4 plays tonight." Jonah sat alone in the projection booth when the words were discovered. He had gone there without telling anyone. Guilt drew him to familiar rooms. The Rook smelled of velvet, dust, and hot machinery. Red seats descended toward a screen hidden behind gold curtains. Painted angels watched from the ceiling, their faces stained by decades of cigarette smoke. Jonah loaded Priya's videotape into the theater projection system. He planned to copy it and send the recording to every news station in the county. If truth had brought the killer out, he would bury Ashwick in truth. The projector started by itself. On the screen below appeared a title card. Rule 4. The expert always thinks he knows the ending. Jonah locked the booth door. "Tamsin," he called, "I am sorry." The theater speakers hissed. "Sorry is what cowards say when consequences arrive. My father kept you alive. Your father kept me useful." The film began. It showed Jonah asleep in his apartment, Jonah buying groceries, Jonah standing at Cal's funeral shrine. He watched weeks of his own life, recorded through windows and across streets. The final image showed him entering the Rook 10 minutes earlier. The projection booth door rattled. Jonah seized a film splicer, its cutting edge no longer than a thumb. "I know how this works. You are distracting me from the real entrance." He looked up at the ceiling hatch. It was closed. He looked toward the small service panel beside the projector. The panel opened, and a gloved hand shot through. The killer caught Jonah by the throat and slammed him into the projector. The machine chewed a strip of film, spraying bright frames around his face. Jonah stabbed with the splicer. The blade cut through the black sleeve. The killer recoiled. Jonah ran into the theater. He reached the stage and turned to watch both aisles. "You want an audience," he shouted. "Here I am." The gold curtains opened behind him. The masked figure stepped from the darkness and buried a fire axe in his back. The blade split his shoulder and lodged beside his spine. Jonah fell to his knees. He reached behind him, fingers sliding over the wooden handle. The killer planted a foot between his shoulders and tore the axe free. Bone cracked. A slab of flesh peeled back with the blade. Jonah crawled toward the footlights, leaving a broad, shining trail. "I did not know she would burn," he said. "You knew she was afraid." The axe descended into his left calf. It cut through muscle and shattered the shin. His foot twisted uselessly as he screamed. The theater doors burst open. Claire, Eli, and Lena entered with 2 deputies. The killer dragged Jonah upright against the screen. A rope dropped from the rigging and tightened around his neck. Lena fired. The bullet tore through the screen inches from the mask. The killer pulled a lever. The rope lifted Jonah into the air. His ruined leg kicked. His hands clawed at the noose. The rising screen carried him toward the rafters, while his face darkened from red to purple. Lena fired again, but the killer disappeared behind the curtain. Claire climbed onto the stage and hacked at the rope with the fallen axe. Jonah dropped 12 feet and struck the boards head first. His skull caved at the temple, pressing one eye outward. He was still breathing. Claire held his hand as blood spread beneath his head. "She is going home," Jonah rasped. "The cabin. No mercy." His fingers closed once around hers, then released. Mercy House waited beneath a storm-colored sky. Fire had eaten the center of the hospital, but 2 stone wings remained. Empty windows stared over the weeds. The old sign hung from one chain, turning in the wind with a rusty squeal. Lena ordered Claire and Eli to stay in the car while she searched with the deputies. Claire waited until the flashlight beams vanished through the entrance, then opened her door. "You knew I would not stay," she told Eli. "I was counting on it." They entered through the broken surgery window. The corridor beyond smelled of wet ash. Small flames burned in glass jars, forming a path into the ruins. At the end of the path stood 2 chairs. Lena occupied one, wrists bound with wire. One deputy lay dead beside her, his throat punctured by dozens of surgical needles. The other hung upside down from a pipe, abdomen opened so that coils of intestine sagged toward the floor. Eli stepped backward. A knife entered his back. The stitched mask appeared over his shoulder. The blade withdrew, then plunged beneath his ribs. Eli fell beside Claire, coughing blood. Lena shouted through the cloth tied across her mouth. The killer removed the mask. Tamsin Hayes had once been tall and beautiful, with the same gray eyes as Claire. The fire had remade her. The right side of her face was a landscape of waxy scar tissue. Her ear was gone, her lips pulled unevenly over exposed teeth, giving her a permanent expression of disgust. Sela's reed had grafted skin across her neck and shoulder in crude, overlapping patches. Red thread marked the edges of newer wounds. Claire could not breathe. Tamsin's good eye filled with tears. You took your time coming back. Claire reached for her. Tamsin raised the knife. Do not touch me with the hand that let go. I thought you were dead. You were supposed to make sure. Eli crawled toward the wall. Tamsin kicked him onto his back. Tell her Rule 5, she said. Eli pressed both hands to his wound. I do not know. Tamsin drove the knife through his palm and pinned it to the floor. His scream echoed through the hospital. The person who saw the truth and ran away must die looking at it. Eli sobbed. I saw her leave the tunnel. Dr. Reed found her. She told me to keep Claire away. She said she never wanted to see any of us again. Claire stared at him. You knew for a year. I thought I was protecting you. Tamsin pulled the knife free and cut across Eli's abdomen. The skin opened beneath his shirt. She hooked her fingers into the wound and dragged him toward the collapsed surgery floor. His heels beat against the tiles. Claire seized a length of burned wood and struck Tamsin across the jaw. Tamsin fell. Claire rushed to Eli, but he shook his head. Get Lena. Tamsin rose and kicked Claire in the chest. Then she shoved Eli into the black opening where the floor had collapsed. He caught the edge with both hands. Claire grabbed his wrist. For a second, she held him above the darkness. Tamsin stamped on Claire's burned shoulder. Pain blinded her. Her grip opened. Eli fell into the old surgery room below. He landed across a standing metal pipe. It punched through his lower back and emerged from his chest. His body slid halfway down it, arms twitching, blood raining onto the floor. Rule 6, Tamsin said. Everybody lets go. Claire charged her. They crashed through the doors of the hydrotherapy ward. Rain poured through the broken roof and filled the tiled pool ankle deep. Tamsin struck Claire's face with the knife handle. Claire caught her wrist. They struggled in the water, sisters staring into each other's ruined memories. I came back for you, Claire gasped. You pushed me through the window, and you never came back again. You told Eli to keep me away. For the first time, Tamsin hesitated. Claire twisted the knife from her hand and drove it into her side. Tamsin screamed. Claire stabbed again, feeling the blade scrape a rib. Tamsin caught her by the throat and forced her underwater. The pool tasted of rust and ash. Claire thrashed beneath Tamsin's grip. Her hand touched a fallen lamp connected to a cable that ran across the ward. She found the switch. Light exploded beneath the water. Electricity locked Tamsin's body rigid. Her scarred face tightened. Smoke curled from her wet hair. The current threw Claire clear onto the tiles, while Tamsin convulsed in the glowing pool. Then the old fuse failed. Darkness returned. Claire crawled back to Lena and cut the wire around her wrists. Lena embraced her so fiercely that Claire's bones hurt. Behind them, wet footsteps crossed the corridor. Tamsin stood in the doorway. Her burned clothes steamed. One eye had turned cloudy white. In her hand, she held the fire axe from the theater. "The final rule," she whispered, "is that the story belongs to whoever survives." Lena reached for her pistol, but Tamsin swung the axe. The blade entered Lena's thigh and dropped her to the floor. Claire ran toward the surgery wing. Tamsin followed, dragging the axe behind her. Sparks jumped each time the blade struck stone. Claire stopped at the edge of the collapsed floor. Below, Eli hung lifeless on the pipe. Tamsin raised the axe. "I survived," she said. "No," Claire replied. "You stayed alive. That is not the same thing." She pulled the rusted release lever beside the doorway. The surgery wall groaned. Tamsin looked up as the remains of the ceiling broke loose. Iron beams and burned stone crashed over her. A beam pinned her across the chest. The axe slid away. Claire knelt beside her sister. Tamsin's breath came in small, wet clicks. Blood spread across her teeth. "Do not leave me again," she whispered. Claire took her hand. "I am here." She stayed until Tamsin's fingers became still. Dawn found Claire and Lena outside Mercy House, beneath a sky the color of old bruises. Ambulances crossed the weeds. Officers carried bodies from the ruins. Nobody spoke about victory. The dead had not returned. The truth had not healed anyone. Ashwick simply had fewer lies than it possessed the day before. Weeks later, the Rook Theater reopened. The stitched mask was locked in the evidence room beneath the sheriff's office, and Mercy House was demolished stone by stone. Claire visited the empty site once. She left 7 white flowers where the surgery wing had stood. That night, her telephone rang at 11:47. Claire stared at it through 3 full rings before answering. There was only silence. Then a familiar metallic whisper said, "What are you watching?" Claire looked toward her dark window. In the glass behind her, the white stitched face seemed to hover for a fraction of a second. She turned. The room was empty. When she looked back, the telephone line had gone dead. And somewhere beneath Ashwick, in an evidence room with no windows and one locked door, a porcelain mask was wet with rain. "Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story made you check the locks, watch the windows, or hesitate before answering your phone, subscribe for more dark tales, tap the like button, and tell me in the comments which rule you think would have saved you. Share this with a friend who claims nothing scares them, And remember that surviving the story does not always mean the story is finished. Until next time, good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment so divine. Whispers of the